Are you a beginner artist who's unsure which medium to start off with? Or maybe you've been painting for a while and you use acrylic or oil paints and now you want to move to a water-based medium but you're not sure which would be the right choice. Well, you're in the right place. Hi and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Shivani and I'm an artist and entrepreneur based in the sunny city of Chennai in the south of India. Join me on my journey of art, business and everything in between by subscribing to my channel below. Today I'm going to break things down for you so you can clearly understand the difference between gouache and watercolor. I'm also going to be helping you out with 3 questions for you to better understand your own art style and make the right choice for yourself. So let's dive in. Let's start by talking about the materials you need for each of these mediums. Watercolor paints either come in a tube or pan form and even as liquid watercolors. I personally like tubes, which I then transfer into a palette like this one. For papers, you could use budget papers like Canson Montval, which is cellulose based, but it's better to use 100% cotton papers with watercolor. In India, we get this one from Hindustan, which is at a mid-range price point. And Arches is one of the highest priced watercolor papers out there. You could even try a brand like Lana and you can choose between cold and hot pressed. When it comes to watercolor, the paints are definitely very important, but you can get decent results with budget paints too. What I think is the most important is the paper, because using 100% cotton paper makes a huge difference to your end result. I'd suggest investing in expensive papers first and upgrading your paints as you go. Let's move on to gouache. The paints usually are in a tube form and I use Winsor & Newton Designer's Gouache, which is one of the more expensive options. You do get budget options, for example Reeves, Winsor & Newton Student Range, and there are many other options out there. And another option to be aware of with gouache is acrylic gouache. For palettes, I like using an airtight one like this so I can mix up my paints in advance and store them and reactivate them when I need to. But when I work on smaller projects, I sometimes use a ceramic palette like this one. When it comes to paper, gouache is very forgiving. Any 300 GSM paper works well, even the Canson Montval one or any other cellulose based paper. I sometimes like using hot pressed paper for my illustration work because the surface is very smooth and so it scans really well. With gouache, the number one thing I'd suggest investing in is the paint. Using an expensive brand makes a huge difference as compared to the budget ones, and I made a whole video comparing expensive and budget brands, so I'm linking to it in case you'd like to check it out. I'm going to start by doing a dark to light gradation for both. For watercolor, I'm using this deep purple color, gradually adding water to it to make it lighter and more transparent. With gouache, I'll use this green that's already mixed on my palette and do the same. You can notice how opaque gouache is in comparison to watercolor, even though they behave in a similar way and they're both water-based, and you can thin down gouache and use it similar to watercolor, but there's a huge difference in the pigment density that makes it appear so opaque even though I had already started adding in a fair bit of water. For the second test, I'm going to try doing blooms, which is when you drop either water or more pigment into your wet paint. I'm painting 2 circles with watercolor first. In the first one, I'll drop in some water and in the second some pigment. You can immediately see how it spreads and forms these lovely blooms, which is part of the joy of working with watercolor. I'll now paint 2 circles with gouache and do the same. You can see how the water and the pigment barely move. This is again attributed to the pigment density of gouache. Now let's try layering. I have 2 base coats in each medium. When you layer watercolor, your layers are usually very transparent and the base color shows through it. And with watercolor, it's always best to work from light to dark. Lay down your lighter layers first and then start deepening your paint and layering over it. With gouache, while we usually do opaque layers, you can even create more watery layers in the form of a glaze. And one of the reasons gouache is great is because you can work either light to dark or dark to light. Now let's try both of these mediums on black paper. You can already see how much more visible the gouache is. Let's allow the paint to dry. For watercolor, I used opera pink because it's a very bright color. You can see here the difference between how it looks on white paper and how it looks on the black paper. So now let's try to understand your art style better so that you can pick the right medium. So as I promised you, here are 3 questions to ask yourself for you to better understand your own art style and judge which would be the right medium for you. The first question is, what appeals to you? As an artist, we're all drawn towards specific kinds of art, and so it's a great idea sometimes to get onto Pinterest or any other such platform and just look for inspiration. Try to notice trends between all the different art that you are drawn towards. For example, do you like bold, vibrant colors? Do you like expressive brush strokes? Or are you drawn towards a more soft and delicate style of art? It's usually the kind of art that we are drawn towards that we end up creating ourselves. It's great to understand that before you decide on a medium for yourself. Question number 2 is, what subjects do you like to paint? Each and every artist is drawn towards different subjects. For some, it's nature. For some, it's specifically flowers and leaves. For some people, maybe it's wild animals, and for some people, maybe it's pets. So even in the realm of nature, there are so many different possibilities. Additionally, you could be interested like me in traditional Indian art forms, or you could love landscapes or still lifes. So when you create a mood board on Pinterest, for example, you might see that you're drawn towards specific subjects. That would also help you make this choice. Now, that's not to say that both of these media can't be applied to nearly every subject, but sometimes one is more suited than the other for a specific subject. The third question is, do you like unpredictability? Now, answering this question was a very significant moment for me in my journey as an artist and in understanding my own personal art style. And the reason I bring that up with regards to this specific topic is that watercolor as a medium is very spontaneous. Watercolor is great for texture, and while there are different technique options, they all fall into this realm of softer and more transparent and delicate art. It's often used in looser styles of illustration. You can vary the quantity of water you're using for varying opacities, and colors often combine on the paper to create beautiful, unpredictable results, which is part of the beauty of watercolor. You can think of watercolor more like stained glass, and it makes use of the white of the paper beneath it. On the other hand, gouache is a more controlled medium. With gouache, what you see is what you get, and even when you use it with more water, it doesn't flow as unpredictably as watercolor does. Gouache is great for flatter illustrations, and it doesn't change much once it's applied on paper. It provides multiple options when it comes to techniques, and it's quite versatile. It's more similar to acrylics, with the difference being that it can be reactivated on paper and on the palette. While gouache can be watered down and used kind of like watercolor, it's not something I particularly enjoy doing too much. So I only do that for my background washes and for my underpaintings, but I don't use it exactly like watercolor because I just feel that doesn't do justice to either medium. It doesn't do justice to the beautiful opacity that gouache offers you, and it definitely doesn't do justice to the watercolor style of painting because watercolors can do that much better. I prefer to use gouache in its opaque glory, only watering it down for glazes or underpaintings, and I build my opaque layers over that. If you're interested to know more about gouache consistencies, I have a video explaining that, which I'm going to link up here and in the description. Both gouache and watercolor are beautiful in their own ways, and there's really no right or wrong answer here, and you might find that like me, you're drawn towards both of these media. But whichever you do pick up as a starting point, I'd recommend sticking with it for a reasonable amount of time so that you're able to judge if it's the right fit for you. There's always a steep learning curve with any new medium, so don't be discouraged if it takes a little time to get used to it. It always gets better with practice. And if you do end up picking up gouache, I have so many videos on my channel that would help you out on your journey. Even if you do pick watercolor, I have a lot of tutorials coming out in the weeks to come, so make sure you subscribe to my channel to stay updated. Once the videos are out, I'll link them in the description below. For now, I'm adding links to a few other artists whose content helped me a lot in my watercolor journey. I hope you will find them helpful as well. So that's it for today. I hope this gave you a good understanding of the two mediums that we spoke about, and I hope you were able to judge your own art style a little bit better. Please don't forget to like this video, it helps me more than you know, and share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future videos. And please drop a comment, I love hearing from you. You can connect with me via Instagram, or you can subscribe to my newsletter to stay updated. I'm currently working on a Gouache 101 e-booklet which will be incredibly helpful and jam-packed with information. So make sure you subscribe to my newsletter because all my subscribers will be receiving a copy of that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.